Tech mining. Today, I have the privilege and the opportunity to speak to the authors of this book, which came out over 2 decades ago, Dr. Alan Porter and Dr. Scott Cunningham, to review the what has basically happened in the last couple of decades, and to talk a little bit about some of the ideas that were in the tech mining book, to see if things have changed, or to see how much of this continues to be a valuable resource and how one looks at the management of technology. In chapter 4, the fuel cells example, I've always found intriguing. It has examples of several visuals as outputs, including something that now would be called a dashboard. Um, I forget what was originally phrased in the book, but dashboard wasn't in the vocabulary back then. Can you speak a little bit about the nature of the visual clues in management of technology? I mean, do decision makers actually make technological decisions based off visuals, or is the reality a little bit messier than that?
In tech mining, uh, figure 4.5, I think it is, uh, we use the rubric of a one pager, trying to summarize things. I can still see a good role for that if you're trying to get a sense of engagement, say, from a busy executive office about this topic. So to give that quick shot, but I think we shouldn't take it as the quick answers, more like the quick instigation of here's issues you need to be thinking about. Look at this over here, with work to be done beyond the concise visualization.
I think narratives and visuals both are incredibly important. I've got two examples that still stick in my mind. One was in the book, there's a lot of maps. We can talk about the statistics of things like correspondence analysis, where we see dots on a page and there's configurations. And to me, they were immediately obvious. There was some initial skepticism amongst us all whether that would actually communicate. And I thought they did. And then I go inside a corporate boardroom and I present these things. And I learned to my consternation that everyone's just like watching my lips. I'm interpreting out loud the pictures for them. And they're really just a reminder. They're like a Rorschach diagram because my users don't understand them at all. And another example, I interviewed in a pharmaceutical company, and the chief information officer said to me, "Well, Scott, where's the drama in what you do?" And I look at him like he's an idiot. There's no drama in this. These are the facts, man. Of course, I didn't get the job. And now I'm still, a decade later or 20 years later thinking, what was he about the drama?
Yeah.
I guess I get some insight into, the necessity of communicating urgency and telling a narrative and getting it across the boardroom table in a relatively short time. One further example that still stimulates to me is you can find there is a commissioning editor in the National Geographic that produces science, that goes and gets people to make scientific visualizations. And she shows a whole panoply of different kinds of illustrations. And it really opened up my mind to the importance of not just factual derivations of the data, but storytelling images that really are going to communicate to the user. Maybe a one final parting shot is, as I teach more visualization to my students, I realize we now have two different domains of visualization. There's the visualization that you and I need as analysts to really get on top of massive amounts of data so that we can tell those narratives and make the short, quick figures that are actually going to communicate to decision makers. And then there's this other kind of, the ones that you could see in The Economist, or the more vivid pictures that will communicate in less than a page, in a quarter of a page. So that field is differentiated too. Personal visualizations for data exploration purposes versus, the punchy ones that will make a front page header.
And in chapter 6, finding the right sources, you note that tech mining process relies on information traditionally collected and made searchable by online data providers, such as Web of Science, or a data aggregator such as SDN. With information at that time, when this book was written, primarily accessed by professional searchers and librarians. But over the last 20 years, information landscape has changed tremendously. Information is becoming an accessible commodity, pretty much accessible to anyone and priced as a commodity, with few professional searchers acting as gatekeepers. Furthermore, those kind of structured, curated sources of the past are under great pressure, primarily financial, from free or relatively free machine-generated primarily data, which basically is machine-generated slop. So what impact does this kind of, you got more information available, it's cheaper, you've got a lot more you can chew on, but the quality is seriously degraded. Does this change the nature of this changing nature of information? Does that have a kind of a profound impact about something, how you would go about tech mining? Alan?
I see some real challenges in terms of who should be doing what. I don't think we actually went back to our tech mining definition as we are talking about the role of the book, but text analyses of R&D information, particularly think of R&D publications, scientific work there, and patents. Well, I think those are well and good, and we're thinking through who's the best provider and so on. It seems to me we should check very carefully before disbanding our support entities to help make that process work smoother. The searchers, the librarians, they would still seem important to me. I also see it easier to reach out to get more contextual richness. And the AI tools with the large language models, the LLMs, can really enrich the storytelling. And I think we've got to study that pretty hard to see if it can be done so it gives us good intelligence and makes it digestible. So work to do. Scott?
Two avenues to explore that. One is the idea that large language models are a lossy compression of the internet. So that's good in two senses, or good or bad in two senses. There's noise in the internet and all these online sources, and these models are going to condense or abstract and even smooth them through. So they're adding noise, but that's a robust kind of noise to find the patterns. But that noise is creeping back into science. So I saw a former director of Elsevier saying one of his leading journals had 5% AI content. There were telltale signs. So this stuff is being written back, being put back in, and it's also being trained. So I've myself been wondering whether or not these custom language models that are using science are going to do a better job. So I'm looking at things, and I feel like I'm a year or 2 years or 3 years behind, but there's things called Cybert that are actually being trained on science. And in theory and in philosophy, they ought to be doing better, because my first feeling of doing tech mining was how strange scientific language was, and all those peculiar terms. They only superficially look like real language, and they have some very specialized meanings. I was always conscious of speaking to experts about these terms. What could they possibly mean? And they might look like English, but they meant something very specific and very narrow. So I think scientific language is not actual real human language, not entirely, or it's a human in a different degree. But the evidence says those models aren't doing that much better. So that's a puzzle. We might see increasingly dedicated invention engines or invention large language models, or some science fiction writers call them docents that will teach us or train us to get on top of science. So you might see splitting there, but it's not happening yet.